2016 Chevy. I don't know, I think it's a Malibu. But we're having issue with the brake performance. They're getting a code, something about the brake booster vacuum sensor. And there is a code there. So I've been messing with the data right here, and see, we're at 5 psi, right? And when I move the car, I am moving right now, and I push the brake pedal, it stops okay, right? But if it goes like down to 3 psi, then the pedal starts pulsing right as, like it's doing it right now, right as you come up to a stop, almost as if it feels like the ABS is kicking in, you know what I mean? And then there's times where the PSI just completely says 0. And at that point, it's really bad pulsing. The car still stopped, but I mean, you gotta imagine I'm only driving like 1 or 2 miles per hour. So I don't know what it's actually like while you're driving, if the car will actually stop. But intermittently, it jumped up to 10 PSI and it was stopping perfectly. I mean, the brakes felt great. So right now, let's put it back in park. I'm gonna hold the brake pedal down. You can see we're at about 5 psi, and the pedal feels like rock hard. It is not moving. Okay, it feels rock hard. And as you can see, 2 psi, the pedal is sinking a little bit, but it's still pretty hard. What I'm gonna do is go ahead and rev up the engine. And as I'm revving up the engine, I could feel the brake pedal sinking. And I did disconnect the hose going to the vacuum sensor, and I was pulling a vacuum on it, and it seems to respond and hold vacuum just fine. I'm wondering if we have a pump that's starting to fail. Okay, so the sensor to me seems to be working fine. When I pulled my own vacuum on it, it held vacuum kind of like it has a check valve, so it's not bleeding off. And we could even prove that inside the car. So the car is running, and let me go ahead and release this pressure. Okay, so you can see right there we're at like 2-3 psi, right? We're gonna let it stabilize, just add idle. Okay, so more or less about 5 psi, right? 5 or 6. And it looks like it's gonna stay right there somewhere. So let's go ahead and hit the accelerator pedal, and because the engine's gonna spin faster, it should pull a greater vacuum. So we should see that PSI go up. Okay, see, we pulled up to 12 psi, and it's gonna hold it, so it's not gonna bleed off or anything. We don't have a leak, you know, until I go ahead. And right now, if I were to push the brake pedal, it's gonna feel normal because we have plenty of vacuum in the booster. You can see the pressure drop the more I pump it, and there we go, the pedal is hard like a rock. And if I were to try to stop this right now, it would just pulse the pedal as if the ABS were kicking in. I'm back with this Chevy Malibu 2016, and we have some new parts. The owner opted out for a new pump as well as a new vacuum sensor, and everything is from the dealer. So one thing I noticed is, let me get some light on here for you guys. Well, let's go over here first. So this is the old pump, and this looks like a port for oil. And if we, let me turn off my light, if you look right here, that looks pretty gummed up. So that's not good, right? I don't know if there's some sort of filter behind here, some sort of mesh filter, but if it is, you can tell this passageway is clearly being restricted. And if we go on the cylinder head, you can see right here where that port would match up. and pretty much the same thing. Look at this. Now that I messed with it, watch it start pouring out. Yep. So clearly this, at least I think that's some sort of oil passage for the pump to keep it lubricated. That's what I'm assuming. And clearly this thing was being starved of oil because it was being restricted. This is why you got to stay on top of your oil changes. That's really what it comes down to. You know, not doing oil changes on time, you letting the oil build up and turn into sludge, causes, you know, things like this. So let's see. Here's the new part. Let's go ahead and pull it out the box. And yeah, I was right. So right there, see, it has like a little mesh or like filter. If I can get this to focus somehow right there. Okay, so let's go ahead and do whatever cleaning we can and put the new part on. Okay, so new pump is installed. Not too bad of a job to replace that part. I saw some people removing this pipe, this air intake pipe, and you really don't have to. All I did was obviously remove it from the pump, that one screw right there, and then pull this clip out from the side. See, this right here is a clip. You pull that out and it releases off of the throttle body. And with that, you know, you could pull it away from the pump far enough to get the pump out. Sure, it'd be easier to remove the, I mean, not easier. Sure, it'd be nice to be able to install the pump without this thing in the way. But that lower clip down there to get it off of the, the intercooler or whatever, it's a real pain in the butt to get to. You can work around this. There's no reason to remove it from down there and go through all that trouble. So now that this thing is pretty much all buttoned up, I'm gonna focus on replacing the sensor, which is back there. You can see it. It's kind of a pain in the butt to get to because of the overflow tank. I'm trying to not remove the coolant and the overflow tank. I don't want to have to go that route. And in case you didn't notice, of course you have to remove the battery. So just go ahead and get that out the way. Right, so I was able to get the old sensor out. And as far as the overflow tank, you know, your natural instinct is to like try to pull it up and out of the way. But I found that if you just move this harness a little bit over to the side, you could actually push the tank down instead of trying to move it up. And look at that, it gives you enough clearance to put your hand inside of there. The first thing I did was connect the connector for the wires, which is this one. All you have to do is pull back on this little red tab, and then you could push the button and pull off, if that makes any sense. So make sure you always pull this red tab out first before you try to disconnect it. At that point, the next step was to remove the vacuum pipe going to it, which is this one. And you can see right there, right where my finger is, and on the back side, on this side as well, there's gonna be two little plastic clips, and you just pry them out a little bit. Don't go too crazy with it, you don't want to break anything. So just pry out on the clip on this side and this side, and this whole red tab is actually going to slide out towards you. And once it pops out like that, you can see it's fully extended. Then you could just go ahead and pull it down, and it's going to come off of the sensor. At that point, the sensor is just on the brake booster like this, and the only thing holding it on are these ribs for her pleasure. And just go ahead and pull it out. It might be a little bit tough to get out because there may be some vacuum behind it, but just give it a nice little wiggle and it should pull right out. So not too bad of a job. The biggest concern was the overflow tank, and seeing that you could just move it down, it really helps a lot. All right, before I forget, I might as well give you guys the part numbers. So this is going to be the part number for the actual pump, and here's the part number for the sensor. Now I believe the real fault here was the pump itself, you know, but the owner wanted to do the sensor as well, just to, you know, get it knocked out. So that's what we're doing. You can see it's still in the packaging. It looks exactly like them, and it's a good quality part. Stuff like this I do not recommend cheap knockoff parts. Alright, so pretty easy to get the new one in. You can see everything's connected to it. And now we just finished putting everything back together basically. Just gonna go ahead and pop this back onto the throttle body. Put our battery on, relocate our overflow tank to where it's supposed to be, and that'll be it. Turn it on and start checking everything. Make sure we don't have any oil coming out of the pump from the bottom, like it's not leaking. Everything sounds good. I don't hear any weird noises. Nothing's about to blow up, so that's good, I guess. Alright, so I got the same data that I pulled up last time, which is just really the brake booster vacuum sensor. And there is an immediate difference. Get this to focus. You can see we're at about 14 psi. That should my foot off of the brake pedal. I'm gonna go ahead and press the brake pedal now, and it's holding steady. Will it drop down? Okay, 9, 11, 12, and it's coming right back up again. So I'm gonna go ahead and push the brake pedal once again. Yeah, drops down to about 9. With the old pump, we were consistently seeing, if I remember correctly, around 4 or 5 psi, and sometimes it would drop down even lower than that, and that's when we really had a problem with the pulsing coming through the brake pedal and the car getting harder and harder to stop. Okay, so this is a known good. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and check the oil on the engine and suggest maybe they get an oil change if they haven't already. Okay, so got the engine cover back on it. Everything is 100% put back together. I checked the oil and it's looking pretty black, so I'm gonna go ahead and suggest that they change the oil, but I'll get in contact with them and ask when's the last time they did a oil change on this thing. Other than that, let's go ahead and take it out for a test drive, but it's looking promising. The data looks like the car's fixed, so I'm pretty confident that the brakes are going to work well now, and the owner does not have to drive in fear of the brakes randomly going out. Alright, so I decided to take the pump apart, and all I did was take this cover off that goes right here in front, and we could actually see how this pump works. So if I spin the back side of it, which is this thing right here, don't mind the Thor band-aid, okay? So yeah, if I spin the back, you could see how it creates that vacuum, and it's actually pretty cool. Let's try to take this whole thing off. See what happens. Oh, alright. Let's put that aside. Alright, so I did a little bit more digging around. It turns out the oil passage that comes from the cylinder head and goes through this little filter or strainer right here actually comes right here. See, there's like a little pinhole, and that's where it would like drip or feed oil into to keep this stuff lubricated. It's why you kind of see some oil inside of here. And this passage right here leads over to here, which would connect to the brake booster, and this passage down here leads to here. I'm assuming what this is for is to bleed off excess pressure so it doesn't create too much vacuum. So I guess this is set to a specific, I don't know, amount of pressure so that it opens up and relieves pressure. I don't know if that's really how it works. I'm just assuming, so I may be wrong on this, but it's actually pretty neat to see this thing run. And on this piece you could actually see the slot right here, and that's to accommodate the oil so it could, you know, get passed through. But I already dropped one of the pieces on the floor, and that thing's good as gone, 'cause I don't know where it bounced away to. But let's put this back in here. But before, when this thing was running, if you put your finger right here, it's not a constant vacuum, it's more like a pulsing of vacuum. And I noticed that this thing doesn't always make contact on both sides. Like if this side is touching, it wasn't touching on this side, so there was a slight gap. And you know, I'm assuming that's why you would feel a pulsing coming through here. But yeah, I mean, we could see all this right here, right? Look how that scratches off, you see that? So it could be something even as simple as this right here. It could be hanging up. You see how this piece is supposed to move back and forth like that? It's supposed to slide. But you can imagine if there's so much carbon buildup, let's just call it carbon buildup, right here, and it could interfere with this piece sliding back and forth how it's supposed to, and that could cause it to not create the vacuum that it needs to create if it's getting stuck here. Because this is a very tight fit. There's like zero wiggle room inside of here, inside of this piece. So it needs to be perfect in order for this thing to be able to slide back and forth inside of here. And definitely I could see with the carbon buildup right here that it could interfere with it moving. So I hope that makes sense. And who knows, that may be the real problem here. You know, that may be why it wasn't able to create enough vacuum. Alright, so looking at this part and how it's constructed and how I pointed out that maybe the carbon buildup right here is restricting the plate from moving how it should to create the vacuum that it should. So let's just say you can't get this part and you need your car fixed right away, or it costs too much money or whatever reason. Is it possible for you to clean up the deposits, the carbon deposits on here, and get this pump working again? Maybe. I don't know. It might be worth a shot. All it would really cost you is your time. So I hope this video helps someone, and who knows, maybe potentially bringing your pump back to life if this is the case on yours. Alright, so I am out test driving this Chevy, and consistently the PSI on the sensor is reading good. I see it drop down to about 9 and then comes right back up to about 14 PSI. So everything's working good. The brakes feel great actually, and yeah. So I think the real fix here was the actual pump. You know, people are quick to want to replace sensors, but reality, the sensor's just doing its job. It's reporting that there isn't enough vacuum. It's kind of like what I see, and I see this a lot with when there's a bad catalytic converter. You know, let's just say the oxygen sensors are reporting catalyst efficiency codes, and people always want to replace the sensors, and I tell them, well, no, because the sensor is doing its job. It's reporting that the filter, let's just call it a filter, the catalytic converter, right? It's just reporting that the filter isn't doing its job. So why are you gonna spend, you know, $80, $90, $100 on a O2 sensor when it's just doing its job? And the actual problem here is save your money for the actual problem, which would be a catalytic converter. So it's the same thing with this right here. The pump is the real problem. It wasn't creating enough vacuum, and the sensor was reading low because it's reporting, it's doing what it's supposed to do. So I hope that makes sense to everyone. You know, and I'd imagine that even if your sensor did like fail 100%, that would mean that the pump should still be working, right? The vacuum pump, because it runs off of the camshaft. So even though your sensor fails, your pump should still be creating vacuum and your brakes should still be working. So it's kind of like if your brake pedal is getting hard and it's getting harder and harder to stop the car, it's kind of it has to be the vacuum pump, you know what I mean, for whatever reason, but it is failing. So I hope that makes sense to everyone. I'm gonna go ahead and close out this video right here, and yeah, this car is fixed, so we'll move on to the next one.